Hey, World Entertainment, and this is the review for episode 7 of Monarch Legacy of Monsters Season 2. This will be fun to edit because I cannot stop coughing, so you're obviously not going to hear it, but my good God, I cannot stop. But this episode, yet again, an incredibly interesting and intriguing episode. So it's called String Theory, and of course, last week ended with Shaw getting communication after opening the rift from his younger self. And it really plays into that, and it shows the possibilities of changing things and how some things do change as a result of all of this. So we have him kind of coming up with a plan to get his younger self to tag Titan X down there, because they're looking for Godzilla, but then he realizes Godzilla wasn't there when he was there the first time. So he changed his course and wants him to tag Titan X, who should be there in his cocoon. And at the same time, he's trying desperately not to tell him who he is and stuff like that. While that's happening, we have Kentaro going to Thailand to Amber Midthunder's character, who we got introduced to last week. And I said her name, she said the name of her father, and it was one of these, who is that? And I had to look it up. Her father is Walter Simmons, the guy who actually creates Mechagodzilla. Now, I don't know what role she's playing in terms of Mechagodzilla, because she brings Kentaro there to tell him she hates Apex, while Kentaro hates Monarch, so the two of them should team up, that she wants to do something different that change the world. She seems to know something about the time differentiation down in Axis Mundi. That's what they've called the world between world things. It's Axis Mundi. So she seems to be thinking they can do something. Now, she doesn't explain too much until Kentaro is willing to be on her side with it. So we don't find out whether he's in or out. I would assume he'll be in. But she says, like, well, hey, what if there's a possibility that we can prevent G-Day from ever happening? So there seems to be something there. While all that's happening, May gets taken by Tim and brought back to the Monarch ship, where he wants her to help figure out what exactly her signal does. And she's trying to tell him, it's not my signal, you know, it's Apex's signal. But they start working together and all this weird stuff, and she finds out that Brenda Holland never brought up her name. So when she was getting interrogated by Monarch way back when, whatever, she never mentioned May. She, in fact, he said, jumped around making sure she didn't answer anything about May. So she was keeping her in the clear, and the question really is why. So that's what's happening with May. That's all that really happens with May in this episode. But Shaw obviously is in communication now with young Shaw, and they did one thing that I really liked. And it's something that happens in movies all the time, but the reactions are always the same, where when they find out, oh my God, you're me from the future or whatever, there's always just that kind of like, oh my God, you're me. When young Shaw figures out that he's talking to his older self, he has a full-on panic attack and thinks he's flat out lost his mind, because he's starting to hallucinate a bit while being down there. He's down there at this stage 15 days. He's out of rations. He's buried the last of his crew, all of this stuff. He's starting to see himself in graves and all this type of stuff. So being told and hearing a voice where he's like, you really sound like me, and then realizing that it is him, it's like crazy. And he takes a full panic attack and just instantly like, no, yeah, you're definitely in my head. I've actually gone insane. So it's not just your usual, oh, okay, what do we do now? Which I really liked and appreciated. Because far too many times do they do the whole, oh, no, you're just me, and they just move on. But they didn't. And he's still not convinced that it is him, and that's not in his head throughout it. And he comes across the camp, and he sees the little radiation detector and realizes it's Keiko's camp. And of course, Aldershaw's telling him, like, you gotta walk away. And there's this great interaction between the two of them on, like, this radio to one another, where they're basically knowing each other's pain for having to leave Keiko. And young Shaw's like, I always promised to protect her. Older Shaw is like, I know, and these are the options we have, and the third one isn't the easiest because it's leaving her, but to leave her will save. But I had noticed that Older Shaw had a scar on his left cheek, and I don't quite remember whether he always had it. But this episode showed no, he didn't, because when young Shaw is running, there's like, if you remember in the first season, the forest charges up and sends out electricity, and he comes across that for the first time, and he falls and cuts the side of his face, and that's where older Shaw gets that scar. So you're seeing that they can change things if they do, and the problem they have is, if he can't convince young Shaw not to try and save Keiko right now, they don't know what the repercussions will be. Whether or not she can be saved then later on. Whether it'll inadvertently release more Titans. They just have no idea. So he does convince young Shaw not to interfere and to go to Titan X. So he finds Titan X. Then older Shaw tells him, like, by the way, this is the hard part. And the hard part is that the big dragon thing that saved Shaw got younger Shaw out of the rip in the first season starts attacking him. And then this weird bug thing comes up out of the ground and starts attacking him. And then, of course, the dragon thing eats the other yoke. So gives Shaw time to run away. And he gets to the mountain and they're like, okay, he's behind that wall, so just hack into the wall and place the tracker. And he's about to do it, and he starts to go, wait, it's not going to wake him up, is it? And older Shaw really doesn't know, and he's like, I'm pretty sure he's dormant type of thing. And he says he's like a sleeping shark. And young Shaw's like, okay, this is a really stupid idea. But he hacks it away, reveals part of Titan X, and shoves the beacon in. So what they've realised, which I forgot to say, is that Titan X is off its migration route in the present for the show, because it's 2017 in it, and they don't know where it is. So once he puts the tracker in, they get the signal in 2017, and like, hey, it's working, we got the signal. But Titan X does wake up, and Shaw kind of almost gets crushed, and he runs away, young Shaw. We don't see what happens with Titan X after that, but he is now being tracked. And by the end, they lose signals, obviously, with each other. And it's like older Shaw tells young Shaw, you gotta go back to the landing pod because this dragon's gonna get you out of there and stuff like that. And he does explain to him, like, you need a big Titan to open the rifts. That's why you need the Titans. But they lose signals, and he's really asking the question, like, what happens if I did change things? Like, how do we know it would have been a bad thing and stuff like that? But by the end, he comes up with a plan that we don't know the plan, that he's going after Titan X. And Zook thinks he's coming along, and Shaw's like, this is a one-man mission. And he's like, oh, do you think a 100-year-old man, relic, can't play shotgun, or he mightn't come back? And then realizes, oh, you think you mightn't come back. So I hope they don't kill Shaw off, because that'll suck. But he's going on a mission. But that's all the stuff with them. Kate and Keiko go to a place where women were being summoned, basically, by the signal from Titan X. And they find a well. And Kate is going down into it, and the rope gives away. So she's fine, and she does shout up to Keiko to let her know she's fine. But she realizes the signal is amplified down there, and says there's a tunnel. I take it leads to the beach. I'll meet you there. And does. And she comes out and says, I think they went down to hear the Titan song and stuff like this, but we've misinterpreted it. It's not lost. It's actually friendly. It doesn't mean us any harm. So we're now looking at a situation of, is Shaw on his way to try and get Godzilla to fight this thing, where this thing is not actually a bad Titan. It's now, by the way, on its way to Australia. By the end of the episode, it makes landfall in Australia. And Tim and stuff see the signal coming up on their board, and one of the guys from Monarch is like, he reads out the signal, and Tim's like, that's the signal from the first mission in 1962. And they're like, well, it's live, and it's Titan X. So it ends with Titan X arriving in Australia, but they don't know why it's gone there. So we're not quite sure what Shaw's plan is here. Kate and Keiko seem to be figuring out something about Titan X, that it's not evil, that it doesn't mean anyone any harm. And Kentaro is getting swayed to stay with Isabel. I'm pretty sure it's Isabel, or Isabella, who's Amber Midthunder, while she seems to be coming up with, I don't know whether she's actually a part of the plan to make Mechagodzilla, but it doesn't sound like it is, seeing as she says, like, oh, we have a plan to stop G-Day from ever happening and stuff. And he does question that, who's we? And that's where she's like, I don't think I want to tell you anymore unless I know you're on my side. We do also find out that she's adopted. So she was adopted by Simmons. And then her sister was born. So they were told they couldn't have kids. So they adopted her. And then the sister was the Wonder Child. And then it was Isabella, who, the Wonder Child, of course, being the daughter from Godzilla vs. Kong, who gets squashed by Kong. So it was a really good episode again. Not a hell of a lot of Titans in this one, but the visual effects were still great. When there was Titans, they looked great. But the interactions between young Shaw and old Shaw, that was the standout for this episode. Really did work really well. Especially the emotional beats when they're trying to basically convince each other, we need to leave Keiko. Like, even older Shaw is like asking, like, why shouldn't I take this chance? You know, and change things. But a really good episode. And I think this might be the penultimate episode. So next week might be the last episode. I'm not 100% sure. But there you go, folks. That's the review for episode 7 of Monarch. So with that, I shall leave it there for this one. So do like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.